Hello, survivors. Thank you for taking the time to listen to the story. If you haven't already done so, please subscribe to our channel. We appreciate it, and thank you in advance. Please leave the name of the city you're listening from in the comment section below. It helps us see our reach in the community. Let's start the story. Look, I know what you're thinking. Another survivor story, another tale of regular folks turned heroes when the world went to hell. But this isn't that kind of story. This is about the day I turned my life's work into the biggest middle finger humanity ever gave to extinction. My name is Danny Ruiz, and 3 weeks ago, I owned Skyburst Pyrotechnics. 47 years old, been in the business since I was 16 and stupid enough to think playing with explosives was a career path. My father started the company in 1982, back when environmental regulations were suggestions and safety protocols were whatever kept you alive long enough to collect a paycheck. By the time I inherited the place, we were the go-to shop for half of New York City. 4th of July, New Year's Eve, corporate events, wedding celebrations. If it needed to light up the sky and make people smile, we made it happen. Our factory sat in the industrial heart of Long Island City, Queens. 3 stories of reinforced concrete and steel, wedged between a textile warehouse and an auto parts distributor. From the top floor windows, you could see straight across the East River to Manhattan's gleaming skyline. On clear days, the view was spectacular. October 15th was one of those clear days. I'd been in the workshop since 5:30 a.m., testing delay fuses for our New Year's contracts. The second floor hummed with familiar sounds, ventilation fans, the distant rumble of early morning traffic on the Queensboro Bridge, and the steady tick of timing mechanisms. My crew wouldn't arrive until 7, but I liked the quiet hours. Just me, the smell of sulfur and metal shavings and rows upon rows of carefully organized pyrotechnic shells waiting to become someone's moment of wonder. October is when we're busiest, prepping for end-of-year shows. Every major venue in the city wanted something special, something that would cap off the year with a bang. Literally. I was assembling a custom shell, gold chrysanthemum with delayed silver crackling, when I heard the first radio report. Multiple incidents of violence reported in Times Square area, NYPD responding to what appears to be coordinated attacks on civilians. I paused, fuse wire halfway to the ignition chamber. Times Square always had its share of crazy but coordinated attacks. That was new. Tommy Brennan arrived first, like always. 26 years old, steady hands, good eye for color patterns. Kid had been with us 3 years and never once triggered a safety violation. In this business, that made him worth his weight in gold. He stomped up the metal stairs to the second floor, breath misting in the October air. "Morning, boss. Coffee ready? Fresh pot on the warmer. How's that shoulder?" He rolled his left arm experimentally. "Better. Doc says I'm good for full lifting again." "Excellent. We've got the Henderson wedding order to finish. 46 shells, custom colors. Pink and gold finale with those silver stars the bride insisted on." Tommy nodded, already moving toward the prep tables. Through the east-facing windows, the first rays of sunlight painted Manhattan's towers in shades of amber and rose. It would have been beautiful if not for the thin columns of smoke rising from several points in the city. "Boss, you seeing this?" Tommy pointed across the river. "That's a lot of smoke for this early in the morning." I set down my tools and joined him at the window. He was right. At least 5 distinct plumes rose from different parts of Manhattan, black against the morning sky. Emergency vehicle sirens wailed in the distance, a constant undercurrent that seemed louder than usual. "Probably just building fires," I said, but something cold was settling in my stomach. City's got good response time. By 7:30, the rest of the crew had filtered in. Lisa Chen, our chemical specialist, brilliant woman with a PhD in chemistry who could have been making pharmaceuticals but preferred creating controlled explosions. Miguel Santos, our heavy lifter and truck driver, ex-Marine who could move mortar tubes like they were cardboard boxes. Jake Morrison, the kid we'd hired 2 months ago, still learning which end of a fuse to light. Lisa was the first to notice something was seriously wrong. She climbed to the second floor with her tablet in hand, frowning at the screen. "Danny, you need to see this. Manhattan's having some kind of mass casualty event." She set the tablet on my workbench. We all gathered around. The news feed showed aerial footage of Times Square, but it looked nothing like the tourist destination I knew. People were running in every direction, abandoning bags and belongings, screaming. Police cars blocked intersections, their red and blue lights painting the chaos in carnival colors. Witnesses describe unprovoked attacks by individuals exhibiting extremely aggressive behavior. The news anchor's voice was tight with barely controlled panic. Emergency services are overwhelmed. Hospitals across Manhattan are reporting an unprecedented number of trauma cases. Miguel squinted at the screen. "What kind of attacks?" "Human bite marks," Lisa said quietly. "The reports keep mentioning bite wounds." Jake laughed nervously. "Bite marks? What is this, a zombie movie?" Nobody else was laughing. On screen, the camera caught a figure shambling through the crowd near the TKTS booth. Even from the helicopter's distance, something looked fundamentally wrong with the way it moved. Too stiff, too purposeful, like a marionette operated by someone who'd never seen a human walk. "Probably bath salts or some new drug," Miguel said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Remember that guy in Florida?" "This isn't one guy in Florida," Lisa replied, scrolling through more feeds. "Brooklyn's reporting incidents now, Queens, the Bronx. Whatever this is, it's spreading fast." Through our windows, the sirens seemed to be getting closer. I walked to the north side of the building and looked down at the street. Our industrial block was usually quiet this time of morning, just delivery trucks and early shift workers. But now I could see people on the sidewalks moving faster than normal, some of them running. A woman in a business suit stumbled past our building, her white blouse torn and stained dark. She kept looking over her shoulder, terror written across her face. Behind her, maybe 50 yards back, a man in coveralls followed. His movements were wrong, too jerky, too single-minded. When he spotted the woman, his head snapped toward her with mechanical precision. "Guys," I called out, my voice tighter than I'd intended. "I think it's time we stop treating this like distant news." They joined me at the window. We watched the man in coveralls gain ground on the woman with disturbing speed. When he reached her, there was no conversation, no demand for money or valuables. He simply grabbed her shoulders and bit into her neck. The woman's scream cut through the morning air like a knife. "Jesus Christ," Tommy whispered. The woman went down hard, the man, or whatever he'd become, on top of her. We couldn't see details from 3 stories up, but we could hear enough. The screaming stopped after about 30 seconds. The sounds that replaced it were worse. "We need to secure this building," I said, stepping back from the window. "Right now." "What about calling the police?" Jake asked. Lisa held up her phone. "No signal. Towers are probably overloaded." Miguel was already moving toward the stairwell. "I'll check the ground floor, make sure all the loading dock doors are secured. Take Tommy with you, don't go alone." As they headed downstairs, I turned to Lisa and Jake. "Inventory. How much food do we have in the break room? Water? Anything that could keep us going if we can't leave for a while?" "You really think it's that bad?" Jake asked. I looked back out the window. The woman in the business suit was standing up now, but something was fundamentally different about her movements. The same jerky, mechanical gait as her attacker. Dark stains covered the front of her torn blouse. "Yeah, kid, I think it's that bad." Lisa had pulled up news feeds from multiple sources on her tablet. "Danny, this is happening everywhere, not just New York. Reports from Philadelphia, Boston, Washington, D.C. The pattern's identical. Mass violence, bite wounds, rapid spread." "How rapid?" "Started in Manhattan around 3 a.m. First reports in other cities began 2 hours later. It's moving faster than any natural disease should spread." The sound of Miguel's boots pounding up the metal stairs interrupted her. He burst onto the second floor, breathing hard. "We've got a problem. The auto parts place next door is on fire, big fire, and there are people, infected people, coming out of it." I grabbed my binoculars from the emergency kit and moved to the east window. Miguel was right. Orange flames licked at the windows of the building next door. and thick black smoke poured from its loading docks. Figures stumbled out of the smoke. Employees, I assumed, but their movements matched what we'd seen on the street. How many? At least a dozen, maybe more still inside. Tommy's voice called up from the first floor. "Boss, you need to see this." We rushed downstairs to find Tommy at one of the street-level windows. He'd pulled back the steel security grating just enough to peer outside. "They're coming this way, all of them." I looked through the gap. The infected from the auto parts building were moving across the narrow street between our buildings. Up close, the horror was even worse. Their clothes were singed and smoking, their exposed skin blistered from heat and flame. But they moved with relentless purpose, seemingly unaware of their injuries. "Back upstairs, now." We retreated to the second floor as the first of them reached our building. The sound of hands slapping against our reinforced doors echoed through the structure. Then came the moaning, a low, wet sound that raised every hair on my neck. "The fire's spreading," Lisa observed from the east window. "Look at the textile warehouse." She was right. Flames had jumped to the building on our other side. Our entire block was bracketed by fires that showed no signs of slowing. "We're trapped," Jake said, his voice climbing toward panic. "Fire on both sides, those things at the doors." I forced myself to think. 3 decades in the explosives business had taught me to stay calm when everything around me was trying to kill me. This was just a bigger version of the same problem. "Miguel, how are we set for vehicle access?" "Delivery trucks in the rear loading bay, fueled and ready. But the bay doors are electric, and with those things out there, forget the truck for now. We need to focus on making this building defensible." The moaning outside was getting louder. I could hear multiple voices now, more infected, drawn by the sounds of the first group. Through the windows, I watched more figures shambling down the street. Office workers, delivery drivers, people who'd been going about their normal morning routines an hour ago. "Danny," Lisa called from her tablet, "the president's making an emergency address." We gathered around the small screen. The president looked like he'd been dragged from bed and shoved in front of cameras. His usual composure was gone, replaced by barely controlled terror. "My fellow Americans, I'm speaking to you today to address an unprecedented crisis. At approximately 3 a.m. Eastern Time, reports began reaching federal authorities of widespread violence in major population centers across the northeastern United States." He paused, glancing at something off camera. "Based on preliminary analysis, we are dealing with an unknown pathogen that causes extreme behavioral changes in infected individuals. This pathogen spreads through direct contact with infected persons." Another pause, longer this time. "Effective immediately, I am declaring a national state of emergency. All civilian travel is suspended. Military forces are being deployed to establish quarantine zones. Citizens are advised to remain in secure locations and avoid all contact with affected individuals." The president looked directly into the camera, and I could see the weight of the world crushing him. "To those Americans trapped in affected areas, help is coming. Do not attempt to reach population centers. Find secure shelter and wait for rescue. And may God help us all." The feed cut to a technical difficulties screen. We sat in stunned silence, absorbing the reality that the president had essentially announced the end of civilization as we knew it. "Military rescue," Jake said hopefully. "They're coming to get us." "Kid," Miguel said gently, "look outside. You see any military, any rescue teams? They can't even handle normal disasters without screwing up. This," he gestured toward the windows where smoke continued to rise from both sides of our building. "This is beyond anything they've ever faced." As if to emphasize his point, a massive explosion shook the building. The textile warehouse had reached something flammable. Chemicals, pressurized tanks, or just accumulated decades of combustible materials. The blast wave rattled our windows and sent a shower of debris across the street. "The fire's accelerating," Tommy observed. "Those old buildings are going up like matchsticks." I looked around at my crew. Good people, skilled people, but none of them prepared for the end of the world. Lisa was brilliant. but had never faced anything more dangerous than a laboratory accident. Miguel had military training but was used to fighting enemies that followed rules of engagement. Tommy and Jake were barely adults. Their entire understanding of crisis management came from movies. But we had something most people didn't. We were sitting on top of several tons of carefully crafted explosive devices. "All right," I said, moving to the window that faced Manhattan. "Here's the situation. We're trapped between fires and infected. Normal escape routes are blocked, but we're not helpless." I pointed across the street to where a line of infected continued to arrive, drawn by the sounds of our building's distress. Those things are attracted to noise and movement. Fire drives them toward us, but it also gives us an opportunity. "What kind of opportunity?" Lisa asked. "Think about what we do here. We create controlled explosions designed to capture attention, to draw people's eyes to specific points in the sky." Understanding began to dawn on their faces. "You want to use our fireworks?" Tommy asked. "Not just use them, all of them. Every shell, every mortar, every Roman candle in this building. Create the biggest, brightest, loudest display anyone's ever seen." "That's insane," Jake protested. "We'd use up our entire inventory." "Kid, take a look around." "What inventory? The world just ended. Currency doesn't matter anymore. Profit margins don't matter. All that matters is survival." Miguel was nodding slowly. "Big enough display could draw infected from a wide area. Clear a path for us to escape." "Exactly, but that's not all." I pulled out my radio and tuned to emergency frequencies. Static filled the small speaker, punctuated by fragments of desperate transmissions. "Evac point compromised. Request immediate assistance. Convoy surrounded, unable to proceed." I fine-tuned the frequency until one transmission came through clearly. Any station. This is Convoy 77 requesting assistance. We have 43 civilians, including children, trapped near Queensboro Bridge. Infected have us surrounded. Running low on ammunition. Request immediate support." I keyed the microphone. "Convoy 77, this is Skyburst Pyrotechnics. What's your exact position?" A pause. Then, "Who is this? Are you military?" "Negative, civilian facility with capabilities that might help. What's your position?" "Northern approach to Queensboro Bridge, approximately half a mile from the bridge entrance. We're stuck between abandoned vehicles and approximately 200 infected. Cannot proceed forward or retreat." I looked at my crew. Through our windows, we could see the bridge in the distance, barely visible through the smoke from burning buildings. "Convoy 77, stand by." I turned off the radio and faced my team. 43 people, including kids, trapped less than a mile from here. "What are you thinking?" Lisa asked. Though I could see she already knew. "I'm thinking we give them the biggest distraction anyone's ever seen. Draw every infected in Queens to this location while they make their escape." "And us?" Tommy asked. I looked around the workshop at 40 years of accumulated knowledge and equipment. Everything my father had built, everything I'd spent my life perfecting. We use the chaos we create to get out ourselves, but we have to time it perfectly. Another explosion rocked the building as more of the fire reached something volatile in the neighboring structures. The infected outside responded to the noise with increased agitation, their moaning growing louder. "How long do we have before the fire reaches us?" I asked Miguel. He studied the progression of flames through the windows. "At this rate, maybe an hour, 2 if we're lucky. Then we better get started." I moved to the storage room where we kept our finished inventory. Rows of mortar shells lined the shelves, each one labeled with its effects and timing. Chrysanthemums, willows, peonies, crossets. Every variety of aerial burst we'd perfected over the decades. "Tommy, start moving shells to the roof. We'll need clear firing lines in all directions." "Lisa, I need you to calculate simultaneous ignition patterns. We want everything to go off within a 5-minute window." "What about safety protocols?" Jake asked. I paused in the doorway, looking back at him. "Kid, safety protocols assume there's a tomorrow to worry about. Right now, the only protocol that matters is making sure those people in the convoy live to see another day. And if we don't survive setting this up?" I thought about the woman in the business suit. The way she'd screamed when the infected man grabbed her. About the 43 people trapped near the bridge, including children who'd never had a chance to see the world before it ended. Then we make sure our last act is something worth remembering. The next 30 minutes passed in controlled chaos. We moved every explosive device in the building to strategic positions on the roof and upper floors. Lisa worked frantically on timing calculations, while Miguel and Tommy rigged ignition systems. Jake, despite his fears, proved useful at connecting fuse lines according to Lisa's diagrams. The fires on both sides of us continued to spread, filling the air with acrid smoke that burned our lungs and made our eyes water. The infected outside had grown to a crowd of at least 50, their constant moaning creating a backdrop of dread that made conversation difficult. "Danny," Lisa called from her calculations, "I've got the timing worked out, but there's a problem." "What kind of problem?" "To create the kind of display you're talking about, something visible across Queens and Manhattan, we need to use everything, including the experimental shells we've been testing." I knew what she meant. We had a dozen shells loaded with experimental compounds that produced effects far beyond normal pyrotechnics. Brighter colors, longer burns, more intense light output. We'd been planning to debut them at next year's 4th of July show. How much brighter? Conservative estimate, 10 times normal luminosity. The finale sequence alone will be visible from space. And the sound? Loud enough to wake the dead. Literally in this case. I keyed the radio again. "Convoy 77, Skyburst Pyrotechnics." "Go ahead, Skyburst. In approximately 15 minutes, we're going to create a massive pyrotechnic display visible across the entire metropolitan area. It will draw infected away from your position, but the window will be brief. You need to be ready to move the moment it starts." A long pause. Then, "Roger that, Skyburst. Understood. How long will the distraction last?" I looked at Lisa's calculations. 5 minutes of active display, maybe another 10 minutes of residual effects. After that, they'll start wandering back. Copy. We'll be ready. And thank you. Whatever happens, thank you. I set down the radio and looked around at my crew. Tommy was connecting the final fuse lines on the roof access. Miguel had positioned emergency supplies near our planned escape route. Lisa was double-checking her timing calculations. Jake was standing by the detonation controls, his face pale but determined. "Everyone clear on the plan?" I asked. "Simultaneous ignition at your signal," Tommy confirmed. 40-second delay between initiation and first shells, Lisa added. "That gives us time to reach the stairwell." "Vehicle ready in the loading bay," Miguel reported. "As soon as the display starts, we make for the truck." "And if the truck won't start?" Jake asked. "Then we improvise," I said. "But one way or another, we get out of this building before the fires reach our powder magazine on the first floor." As if responding to my words, another section of the textile warehouse collapsed in a shower of sparks and flaming debris. Some of it landed on our roof, and I could smell wood beginning to smolder. "Time's up," I announced. "Everyone to your positions." We took our places around the detonation control panel Lisa had rigged. Outside, the moaning of infected had reached a fever pitch. Through the windows, I could see them pressed against every entrance, clawing at doors and walls with mechanical persistence. I picked up the radio one last time. "Convoy 77, final check. Are you ready?" "Ready and waiting, Skyburst. All civilians secured in vehicles, engines running." I looked at each member of my crew, these people who'd chosen to trust me with their lives. They nodded back, ready. "Convoy 77, initiating display in 10 seconds. Move when you see the first shell burst." I positioned my hand over the master ignition switch. Through the east window, Manhattan's skyline stood silhouetted against the morning sun, smoke rising from dozens of fires across the city. The world as we knew it was ending, but for the next few minutes we were going to remind everyone what beauty looked like. "Here we go," I said, and flipped the switch. The building shuddered as 40 years of pyrotechnic expertise erupted into the October sky. The first shells launched with a thunder that shook every window in Queens. 24 mortars fired simultaneously from our roof, their trails painting bright arcs against the smoke-filled sky. For 40 seconds, Lisa's calculations held us in perfect suspension, the shells climbing toward their apex while we counted down the moments until detonation. Then the sky exploded into a symphony of light and sound that made the 4th of July look like a birthday candle. Golden chrysanthemums burst 300 feet above us, each one large enough to fill a city block with brilliant radiance. Silver willows cascaded like metallic waterfalls, their tendrils reaching down toward the burning buildings below. Red, white, and blue crossettes split the air with sharp cracks that echoed off every surface in Long Island City. But that was just the opening sequence. The infected outside our building stopped their assault immediately. Every head turned skyward, drawn by the primal magnetism of light and noise. Through our windows, I watched them stumble away from our doors, mouths hanging open as they stared at the celestial display above. "It's working," Tommy breathed, pressed against the north window. "They're moving away from the building." I keyed the radio. "Convoy 77 display is active, move now." "Copy, Skyburst, we're rolling, thank you for this." The second wave launched as we reached the stairwell. 30 shells this time, including our experimental prototypes. The compounds Lisa had been perfecting for months created colors that shouldn't exist. Electric purples that seemed to vibrate in the air. Greens so intense they left afterimages on your retinas. Blues that made the October sky look gray by comparison. We took the stairs 3 at a time, the building shaking with each new volley. Behind us, the workshop where I'd spent most of my adult life was already filling with smoke from the spreading fires next door. By the time we reached the ground floor, the temperature had risen noticeably. "Loading bay," I directed, leading the crew toward the rear of the building. "Stay low and move fast." Miguel had done good work preparing our escape route. The delivery truck sat ready in the bay, engine running, rear doors open for quick access. He'd even positioned emergency supplies in the cargo area, water, basic medical kit, what food we'd had on hand. The third wave launched overhead as we reached the truck. This sequence included our largest shells, 12-inch mortars that produced effects visible from orbit. Each burst was the size of a football stadium, painting the entire sky in cascading fire. "Jesus," Jake whispered, staring up through the open bay doors. I had no idea we could make anything this spectacular. Neither did I admitted. Lisa outdid herself with these calculations. The sound was overwhelming. Not just the explosions, but the echo effects bouncing off Manhattan's skyscrapers and returning to us across the East River. Every infected within miles had to be looking up at our display instead of hunting for prey. Lisa consulted her timeline. 4th wave in 20 seconds. That's when we move. I positioned myself at the bay door controls. The infected that had been surrounding our building were now scattered across the street, all facing skyward with the same slack-jawed fascination. Some had begun wandering toward the launch point on our roof, drawn by the source of the spectacle. The 4th wave was our masterpiece, 60 shells in rapid succession, creating a rolling barrage of light that turned night into day across Queens. Gold and silver palms spread like enormous trees of fire, their branches reaching down to touch the burning buildings. Purple and green comets streaked between them, leaving trails of sparkling stars. "Now," I said, and triggered the bay door. The metal panel rolled up with mechanical precision, revealing the narrow alley behind our building. More infected were visible in the distance, but they were all moving away from us. Drawn by the irresistible lure of our pyrotechnic symphony, we piled into the truck, Miguel driving, me in the passenger seat, the others in the cargo area. As we pulled out of the bay, I caught a glimpse of our building through the side mirror. Flames were already licking at the first-floor windows where our main powder magazine was stored. "Which way?" Miguel asked, navigating around abandoned vehicles in the alley. "East toward the bridge approach. We need to confirm the convoy made it through." The 5th wave launched as we cleared the alley, and this time I could see the full effect from ground level. Our experimental shells created a curtain of fire across the sky, not just individual bursts, but a continuous wall of light that stretched from horizon to horizon. The noise was indescribable, like standing inside a thunderstorm that never ended. Every infected in sight had stopped moving and stood transfixed, faces turned upward. Some of them swayed slightly, as if the rhythm of the explosions was hypnotizing them. Others simply stood frozen, their primitive neural systems overwhelmed by sensory input beyond their capacity to process. "Danny," Lisa called from the back, "look at the bridge." I followed her pointing finger and saw something that made my chest tighten with pride. The Queensboro Bridge bridge, which had been clogged with abandoned vehicles and wandering infected when we'd spotted it earlier, was now clear. In the distance, I could see the convoy's taillights as they crossed the span toward Manhattan. They'd made it. "Convoy 77, this is Skyburst. Confirm your status." A crackling voice came back. "Skyburst, we're across the bridge and proceeding to the established safe zone. All 43 souls accounted for. Your display created a clear corridor exactly as promised." I allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. 43 people, including children, were alive because we'd turned our life's work into controlled chaos. The sixth and final wave was already climbing skyward as we drove through the industrial district. Lisa had saved the best for last, a sequence of shells that would normally have been spread across 30 minutes of a major holiday display, all compressed into a single minute of sustained bombardment. Gold and silver willows fell like rain. Red chrysanthemums bloomed into white crossettes that split into blue stars. Purple comets chased each other across the sky while green palms spread overhead like the canopy of some impossible forest. The noise was constant now, a rolling thunder that seemed to make the earth itself vibrate. "There," Tommy pointed ahead. "Corner of Vernon and 49th. That's where the convoy was stuck." Miguel steered toward the intersection, weaving between abandoned cars and debris. The area was now completely clear of infected. Every one of them had wandered toward our building, drawn by the spectacle we'd created. We stopped at the intersection where, an hour earlier, 43 people had been trapped and facing death. Now it was empty, except for scattered belongings and evidence of their hasty departure. Tire tracks in the dust led toward the bridge approach. "They really made it," Jake said wonderingly. "We actually saved them." I was about to respond when the horizon behind us lit up with a different kind of light. Through the truck's rear window, I could see our building, or what had been our building. The fires had finally reached the first-floor magazine where we stored our bulk powder supplies. "Everyone down," I ordered, and we dropped below the windows just as the shockwave hit. The explosion was unlike anything I'd ever experienced, even in my decades of working with explosives. The sound wasn't just loud, it was physical. A compression wave that seemed to squeeze the air from our lungs. The truck rocked on its suspension, and every piece of glass in the surrounding buildings shattered simultaneously. When the initial blast subsided, I cautiously raised my head and looked back toward our facility. Where Skyburst Pyrotechnics had stood for 40 years, there was now a crater filled with orange flame and rising smoke. The auto parts building and textile warehouse on either side had been reduced to burning rubble. The entire block looked like it had been struck by an artillery barrage. "Holy hell," Miguel whispered. "How much powder did we have stored down there?" "About 3 tons, I replied, watching the mushroom cloud of smoke and debris rise into the morning sky. "Mixed compounds, various chemical formulations. I'm surprised the explosion wasn't bigger." Lisa was staring at the destruction, her tablet forgotten in her lap. "Danny, that blast had to be visible from space, and the sound..." She was right. The explosion echoed across the city like thunder, reflecting off buildings and rolling across the landscape in waves. Even the infected that had been drawn to our fireworks display were now stumbling toward this new source of noise and light. But they'd have to travel quite a distance to reach us. The blast had cleared everything within a half-mile radius. "So what now?" Tommy asked. "Where do we go?" I looked around at my crew, the people who'd trusted me enough to gamble their lives on a plan that should have killed us all. They were alive, unhurt, and free to move while thousands of infected were drawn to the burning crater that had been our workplace. "Now we find somewhere safe and figure out how to survive in whatever's left of the world," I said. "But first, we monitor emergency frequencies and help other people do what we just did." I tuned the radio to the emergency band and immediately heard multiple transmissions. Other survivors trapped in various parts of the city, calling for help, describing situations similar to what the convoy had faced. "This is Skyburst Pyrotechnics," I broadcast on the general emergency frequency. "We just successfully assisted in a civilian evacuation using pyrotechnic distraction. If you're trapped by infected and have clear escape routes blocked, we may be able to help. We have limited supplies but proven methods." The responses came immediately, voices filled with hope and desperation, describing groups trapped in buildings, on rooftops, in vehicles surrounded by infected. Each transmission represented real people facing death, people we might be able to save using the knowledge we'd just proven worked. "Danny," Lisa said quietly, "we don't have any more fireworks, the building's gone." "No," I agreed, "but we have the knowledge. And there are other pyrotechnic companies in the city, other suppliers, other people with access to the materials we need." I thought about the convoy crossing the bridge, about the children who would live to see another day because we'd been willing to sacrifice everything we'd built. The satisfaction that filled my chest was unlike anything I'd ever experienced from a successful show. "Tommy, Miguel, Jake, any of you who want to come with me, we're going to keep doing this. Find other survivors, help them escape. Use every trick we know to beat these things at their own game." "Count me in," Tommy said immediately. "And me," Miguel added. "Got nowhere else to be." Jake took longer to decide, staring at the burning crater that had been our livelihood. "Will it work again?" "The distraction method. As long as there are infected and we can make loud, bright explosions, it'll work," I assured him. "These things are driven by primitive instincts. Light and sound will always override their hunting behavior." Lisa was already pulling up maps on her tablet. "There's a fireworks distributor in Brooklyn, another in Manhattan if we can get across. Plus theatrical supply companies, construction firms with access to industrial explosives." I smiled, feeling something I hadn't expected to feel at the end of the world: purpose. "Then that's our new mission. We find supplies, we find people who need help, and we give them the biggest, brightest distractions they've ever seen." As if to emphasize the point, another distant explosion echoed across the city. Somewhere in Queens, a gas station or chemical plant had finally succumbed to the spreading fires. The sound drew infected from a wide area, their moans rising like a discordant chorus. "You know what this means, don't you?" I said, watching the infected stumble toward the new source of noise. "What?" Tommy asked. "We're not just survivors anymore. We're the guys who figured out how to fight back." I put the truck in gear and headed toward the bridge. Behind us, our former workplace continued to burn, sending a column of smoke high into the October sky. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the promise of saving more lives using the skills we'd spent decades perfecting. For 40 years, I'd made fireworks to celebrate life's good moments. Now I was going to make them to preserve life itself. The world had ended. But for the first time since the broadcast started, I was looking forward to tomorrow. Because tomorrow, we were going to put on another show, and I intended to make it spectacular. Miguel adjusted the rearview mirror as we drove toward Manhattan, giving us one last look at the destruction behind us. The crater, where Skyburst Pyrotechnics had stood, was still glowing with residual fires, and infected continued to stumble toward it from all directions, drawn by heat and light like moths to a flame. "Hey, boss," he said with a grin that was equal parts exhaustion and exhilaration. "Think anyone's going to remember this show?" I looked back at the mushroom cloud rising into the morning sky, visible from every borough of New York City. Somewhere across the bridge, 43 people were telling their children about the light that saved them. Somewhere in the darkness ahead, other survivors were waiting for us to find them. "Yeah," I said. "I think they'll remember." We drove into the uncertain future, leaving behind the biggest fireworks display in human history, and carrying with us the knowledge that sometimes, when the world is ending, the best thing you can do is light up the sky and remind everyone what beauty looks like. Because even in the apocalypse, people need something to look up at, and that's exactly what we'd given them.